So some of the things that the state's Medicaid contractor has done is the physicians, when I had a heart test, the cardiologist, he intentionally sabotaged the exercise EKG test. It has a goal, how many heartbeats a minute, and when you reach that goal, you kind of end the test. And so what this cardiologist did is he already knew, because cardiologists, they can make a diagnosis without ever even running a test. He already knew that the problem that I was having it's a very severe problem, which is that when I exercise, the heart rate does not come up, and that's called chronotropic incompetence, and that's a very bad heart problem. And so what he did is, the other thing that also stops the heart rate from rising much with exercise is by taking the drug called a beta blocker. So if people are on beta blockers, they actually tell them not to even use their beta blocker when they take this exercise stress test. So what this doctor did is he actually, this is like a fully automated test. So this cardiologist, he went into the system and manually wrote in that I was taking a beta blocker. And by doing this, instead of setting my heart rate at 186, he was able to set it down to 150. Okay, and then when the test was running, when it got to that point, he tried to cut it off, but I forced him to keep the test going. And immediately at that point, my EKG thing just went haywire. And then after that, he never released the report, and I asked him for the report from the EKG, and what he says is, and this has been the frequent thing whenever they get caught with wrongdoing, and whenever they are asked to make good on what they're supposed to give, he just says he's not going to see me anymore, even though with the Medicaid rules, it's actually right in the law. The physician is not supposed. Now, this is the basic thing even with private medical care, that the AMA Code of Ethics is that you just can't break off a doctor-patient relationship from the physician's side. But in any event, this is all fully codified in federal and state law. So, but this Medicaid contractor, their doctors, they regularly do this, because a lot of times they do wrong and they hide things, and then I go and I challenge them, and when they get caught, rather than being forced to give it up, they just say, hey, I'm not going to see you anymore, even though they're not supposed to do that. So they're entirely acting unlawfully, and a lot of the things they were doing on the recordings are also unlawful, because I have the right, because one of the things I have a right to know is my full medical condition. So anytime I ask them on the phone, or when I asked them while I was sitting at the doctor's office in some of these visits, what my medical condition is, and they just found some trick to get around answering it and gave me the runaround, those were all unlawful acts. So they did all these unlawful acts. I mean, literally what it sounds like I was saying, it's as though someone is experiencing like housing discrimination or something, and they go and they try to get a house and they get all these excuses. And that's literally what's going on, and what was going on is fully illegal, being done by a Medicaid contractor and Medicaid subcontractors. And because what they're doing is actually impeding my medical care, and it's a heart condition and I'm not getting medical care, and since they are the government's contractors and they're carrying out a state function, it's actually said to be that they are acting under color of law. And it's already been established by the courts that in fact this is acting under color of law. So it's the same as a police officer committing police brutality. So the injuries they're causing to me by not giving me my medical care, it's not just some private action. It's actually they're said to be a state actor doing this, and they are depriving me of my my what it, because the 14th Amendment says that I have a right to liberty and property and such. So when they when they don't give me the medical care I'm supposed to get, and they're state actors and they're doing it maliciously, and they're causing my heart condition to get worse without any treatment, what they're doing is they're depriving me of my liberty, and that's unconstitutional. And also, because I have a right to sue these people who have done all this harm to me, these people are supposed to also give me the basic medical facts which I can use to file a lawsuit and stuff, and that gets me property. So what they're doing is all unlawful in many different ways. And so they know all this, and one of the things they did is, after I made the recording, they already checked with all their lawyers, and this is a big Medstar doing it now. Although it's a small contractor, this is the big giant Medstar healthcare entity. They checked with all their lawyers, and they found out that my recordings were all legal, because the Maryland courts have found that when someone is acting under color of law, which is basically they are carrying out a state function, like a police officer or even someone working at motor vehicles or whatever, they are acting out in the public fora. And so Maryland has this strange law where both parties to a recording have to consent, unlike most other states where only one party has to consent. So it's a serious crime, and it's a Maryland wiretap law, but I have not in any way violated that law, because here not only I am recording government contractors, while they're doing the government work on me, but also there's this extra thing with medical care. Medical care, the conversations occurring in medical care, it's actually not a regular conversation. It's actually an instrument that occurs within medical care, and that I've explained in my legal statement. And they already knew all this, and they knew these recordings were perfectly legal, and yet they went, Medstar, using their power, and they conspired with the Montgomery County Police Department and the Montgomery County Prosecutor's Office, and they made a false application for search and arrest warrants. So on one day in March of last year, the police came to my house. Well, the police came and parked in front of my house at 9 a.m. And at 10 a.m. they left. So they were here at my house. So they were parked in front of my house from 9 to 10 a.m. And then later I figured out exactly what they were doing. At 9 a.m. they went to a judge and they gave their sham warrant with all the lies in it. And they were hoping for the judge to give them a rubber stamp, and like at 9:01 or 9:02 a.m. they could immediately execute the warrant. They could come arrest me, and they could search my house, and they could take all my computer files and so forth. Because one of the things that I had going is these people already knew that I already had some consultation with a medical expert witness who knows a lot of these things. And this is a medical expert who usually actually always works on the side of the physicians. So by knowing who this person was, they were seeking to ruin this person. So they were really trying to get my personal information, because really there was no need for a search warrant, because really what I had, I put everything on YouTube. They used the evidence that I had on YouTube. So everything was on YouTube, so there's really nothing to search for. and yet they went and applied for search and arrest warrant, and they took it to the judge at 9 a.m. on a weekday. They really thought the judge was going to sign it, but what it looks like happened is the judge, from 9 to 10 a.m., the judge diligently studied the whole thing, and at 10 a.m. the judge said no. So even with all the falsehoods they put in the application, the judge still ruled in my favor. But this is the extent to what these people will go. So even though the crime, the sex assault and the very serious crimes occurred in Montgomery County, where the Montgomery County police and the prosecutors are supposed to prosecute the case, the same two agencies did these actions, which are also now being accessories after the fact. And really, the prosecutor and the police department, people from those offices, they really should go to jail, because they are in fact accessories after the fact. I mean, this was an illegitimate a warrant application, and the judge ruled in my favor. So obviously it was illegitimate. And so this is kind of what you get with healthcare in Maryland. So, they even go through the police. They, for that, when someone says someone owns the police or whatever, it may be an exaggeration. But in this case, they do own the police. They do own the local government. They own all the local regulatory agencies. So when you go for healthcare in Maryland or the Washington, D.C. area, whether you go to Hopkins or Medstar or University of Maryland or Innova or Adventist Healthcare or Holy Cross, or wherever you go, or any of these hospitals or doctors you go in Maryland or in Northern Virginia or even in Washington, D.C. Well, Washington, D.C. itself may be okay, I'm not sure. But in this area, in general, you can just expect that all kinds of horrible things can be done to you, and then these people will completely own and corrupt the full complaint process, so you won't really get anywhere. So what I'm saying is there's so many other states. You can go all over the place, right? You can go to Ohio. There are good hospitals in Ohio. There are good hospitals in Minnesota. There are good hospitals in Florida. In fact, Florida is really good. They have a lot of, it's really a low regulation state, and you have a lot of good healthcare providers there, and you have a lot of choice, and you don't have all these people acting in collusion with each other, and you don't have this kind of this version of the military industrial complex. This is more like the government healthcare complex going on. So and what is the less regulation later state, the better, because you have a state like Texas where you have a case in which you have the case of this Dr. Dunch. I think it's spelled D-U-N-T-S-C-H, and he was intentionally botching surgeries, but ultimately they caught him and he's being prosecuted. But the same thing can't be said here. So Texas is like a really low regulation state, and yet when a doctor did those kind of crimes, even though it wasn't caught initially, ultimately they did get the guy and he's being prosecuted. But the same thing can't be said here, because in Maryland, with people like Hopkins and so forth owning all the regulatory agencies and so forth, they're going to keep getting away with wrongdoing. And of course, if you keep getting away with wrongdoing and covering things up, then of course it's going to look like you have the best rankings in the world. So obviously, I'm sure Hopkins would not deserve the top rankings, because they have all kinds of crimes and horrible things going on. And And after the Maryland Medicaid contractor and their physicians have been harming me for the last couple of years by taking these bribes and concealing all those injuries, and now what they have done is they have selected one of these physicians, a cardiologist, to kind of take the blame as a medical malpractice. So this cardiologist has actually gone and filed a claim on my behalf. Who's ever heard of a physician who is going and admitting to medical malpractice and filing a claim on behalf of their patient? So he's filed a claim on behalf of his patient, saying that he's misdiagnosed me when they've been doing it intentionally and harming me the whole way through.